Coach Druid.
Okay, cool. So you sort of come here from time to time anyway. It's a festival that you're already very familiar with.
I've
In fact,
wondered
the
a
reason
while.
that you've come
These friends are about to embark on a fantastic journey in the realm of Dungeons & Dragons, a popular tabletop game where players slip into the roles of imaginative creatures to solve mysteries and battle monsters.
say that Dungeons and Dragons is essentially it's the means to be able to tell a collaborative story. So it's essentially a set of rules that you can build a fantasy world as a group around and just sort of get away from the sort of day-to-day life for a few hours.
Just like our adventurers, Charities had to face unprecedented challenges in the past few years, fighting to protect their communities. In the city of Colchester, one such charity, Colchester Engagement and Next Steps, had to resort to drastic measures, as manager Marina Woodrow explains.
And we closed the doors for the first time in 35 years, and it was an awful thing to have to do. But every cloud has a silver lining. We unfortunately had to make people redundant. I was the only member of staff that was retained, and I worked on a funding bid for the National Lottery Community Fund and secured just over £115,000. And then we set to work with making the building better. We would never have been able to do that without COVID, which is why I say silver lining, because we would have never closed our services because we were so obviously needed.
Another charity at the front line of the battle against COVID was the Colchester and Ipswich Hospital charity. While dealing with medical emergencies was nothing new, they experienced immense support from their community.
I think what COVID did was actually the goodwill of the community wanted to be given to staff. We were seeing on the news stories of staff not being able to eat, not being able to get home. I think for the first time, people in our communities that wanted to give back to just staff. We've always had, I'd like to give you a box of chocolates, or without being derogatory, box of chocolates, or bring in some cake, or take the team out for a Christmas drink or whatever. We've always had that, but the extent to which the outpouring of goodwill came in, wow, it was huge. Whether that was food gifts, whether it was monetary gifts, whether it was people offering to help, it was overwhelming at times. It was lovely, but it was sometimes overwhelming.
Children and young people found themselves often overlooked in light of the uncertainties of the pandemic. David Solis, CEO of Colchester Intending Youth Inquiry Service, witnessed the struggles which presented new challenges for his charity.
I think the thing we saw straight after COVID was, especially in young people, was that there was no resilience. So that they'd missed out on so much social stuff. It was kind of like being locked away for 2 years. So a lot of young people hadn't transitioned from primary school into secondary school. That caused a lot of angst. Some had obviously had terrible times staying at home. So domestic violence was something that was very much on our radar on all levels, and that had a knock-on effect, and still does. Anxiety, getting back in society. Young people who really did well not going to school suddenly had to go back to school, and that caused them really big problems. Young people, and you're not particularly, I say, within your age group as well. The life experience that this will pass. All this stuff passed. COVID will pass. Cost of living will pass, and it will get better. I hope it will always get better. But if you're like me, you've seen this 3 or 4 times, not COVID, but cost of living and worries and all the unemployment stuff. You kind of get used to it, and you know that you'll be all right. You'll know that you should be okay at the end of it. And that's the bit we're not really got that time with young people at the moment, because all they can see has been like, this has been crap for 2 years. This is actually awful from 3 years, 4 years. They go to university, 70 grand's worth of debt. It's just every single thing seems to be loading against young people.
Funding is a central element of charities and their ability to deliver essential services. There are multiple ways how charities can be funded. First of all, the individual donations in the form of money or goods. Those can be either one-time donations or regular support. Grants from government bodies, foundations and trusts are also a substantial resource for charities. Then, there are corporate sponsorships and legacies, where charities receive funds from deceased individuals. Lastly, there are fundraising events, which can be organised on different levels, either locally, nationally, or online. Examples of fundraising events are sporting events, auctions, or galas. As charities don't get paid directly for the services that they deliver, there arises an issue, according to Mandy Jordan.
I think there's a massive problem with the way charities are funded through all kinds of mechanisms in the UK, through grant funding, that many of our charity groups find themselves, they're only supported for a 6-month fixed term, a 12-month fixed term. They're always looking for the next lot of money, and their attention ends up being sometimes about that and plugging the gaps rather than service delivery.
Donations in any shape or form play a vital part for charities. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, for example, benefited from a legacy not too long ago.
We get something called legacies now and again. Can't guarantee on that we're going to get them, but sometimes people will leave us money after they die. We've just received a very big one from a very nice couple that lived in Chelmsford. There was an Italian gentleman married to an English lady. He died about 3 years ago, and his wife died about a year ago. And they had a house in Chelmsford. They had some money in the bank, and they had a car, and they also had lots of things in their house. And I was contacted about a year ago to be advised that we were one of 2 beneficiaries from their will. They had no children, and they wanted half of their money to come to our RSPCA branch, and they wanted the other half to go to another charity called Farley Hospice. And I was invited to go to the house with somebody from the other charity, and we was allowed to collect the clothing, the ornaments, the plates, the pots and pans, everything. We could have what we wanted from the house to take back to the charity shops to sell. So we went over there about this time last year. We went over there. I had 3 or 4 people with me and a big van, and the hospice charity had a similar team of people and another big van as well. And we worked very nicely together, wrapping all of the ornaments up very carefully and taking all of that stuff away. And I just heard yesterday that the money they've sold the house now, they've sold the car, and they've just released the money. So we're going to be getting £320,000 from that one donor. So that's fantastic news for us. That's a really big amount of money for our charity. And Farley Hospice will be getting the same amount of money as well. So they'll be very pleased.
While everyone was trying to survive the pandemic and make it through financial struggles during the cost of living crisis, one might expect support to decline drastically. But the charities in Colchester were not left on their own during these trying times, as Marina Woodrow and Mandy Jordan say. However, the support received reflects the struggles.
So, during COVID and during the refurbishment programme that we had here, we were very well funded. We had a funding programme, and we were given to very, very generously by people. We've seen a slight dip in it since we reopened, but not a substantial dip in it. So people, despite the cost of living crisis, are still very supportive in their monetary donations, and also their donations in kind as well. We get food and we get toiletries, and people do collections for us. So we really are very lucky to have the support that we have.
I think it's a difficult one because I think the community do wish to support, but they're also, in the middle of their own financial crisis. So I think we are still seeing support. It's lower than in COVID for staff specifically. I think our patient support hasn't really changed. It did ebb away a little bit bizarrely during COVID because there was so much money, and everyone could see that actually the money and the need was around a vaccine and a cure and support for those undergoing COVID. But that real spike that we saw, it's leveled off. It's not gone away. It's definitely higher than pre-COVID, but it's not as high as it was during COVID, which you'd expect, really.
Cherry June volunteers for the Essex and Herts Air Ambulance and has noticed a decline in volunteering and donations.
And I think post-COVID, I can't say for sure, but it feels like people have got out of that giving mood, if I can put it like that.
Volunteering is a crucial component, closely tied to charities. Without volunteers, many charitable organisations would not be able to deliver their services. COVID, and with it social distancing, complicated this relationship. As life returns to normal, people are gradually returning to volunteering, as Mandy Jordan and David Solis report.
We get the support we need from the community. We have a lot of grateful patients, grateful families that will support us because we've cared for their loved one. We have amazing support from our community volunteers who steadfastly rocked up both during COVID and have come back in their droves. It is harder to recruit volunteers now. A lot of our existing cohort from COVID have aged somewhat during that time, perhaps have pre-existing medical conditions and can't come back to ours. But it's very specific to our environment. Because if you have got pre-existing conditions, it's not the best place always for some of those volunteers to return to. And unfortunately, we've lost a few volunteers during that time.
So, obviously during COVID, we lost most of the volunteers that we had. They all kind of went off and did other stuff, or did literally zero. What we've done is we changed the way the volunteers work. We still get quite a lot of volunteers. People ring us up, say, can they volunteer? Problem with it is, as ever, we're very specialist, but also our young people are very vulnerable. So you got to be really careful about anybody coming into the building who we're not sure about.
Unfortunately, a magical glass bowl that can predict the future is only real in a fantastical world like Dungeons and Dragons. What the future holds for the charities in Colchester is a mystery, but they are preparing.
I think the third sector itself is trying to place itself in the world of systems. There's lots of systems talk around health and social care and stuff like that. People come to charities because at the end of the day, they're the only ones that will run a service to a certain level. All services are under the cost. You look at NHS, they've not had enough staff for 20 years. So why they keep going on about it now is beyond me. We've known that for 20 years. So what you have is you need those small, low-level charities to do a lot of the fun stuff, a lot of the stuff that just keeps young people well.
Unfortunately, I think things only get better after they've had a period of getting worse for a substantial time, and then hindsight is always great, isn't it? We always in this country wait for a disaster before we kind of go, oh well, maybe if we'd have done that would have been better. And I think that's probably what it would take. It's going to take it will take high levels of homelessness and rough sleeping in the area before people will realise actually, oh no, that these agencies do pick people up, and actually if we funded them better, maybe they could expand their services more and offer more support.
I think we're in a period of struggle for people, even if things are just about okay or just about managing. That might be the mode or the median or the mean or whatever average you want to come up with. There will still be a lot of people who are outliers who will be suffering, and what we're doing is trying to make sure that they don't suffer unnecessarily.
Dungeons and Dragons has become a way for Yes to lead their target group out of challenging times, as other charities try to do the same.
Yeah, there's I don't think it's a secret as such, but there's a lot of people that were coming to Yes after the pandemic with sort of issues around anxiety and sort of socialising in large groups and that sort of thing, which is part of where the idea for D&D came from. Obviously it's a group activity, and there's a certain level of escapism because nobody's sort of coming there as themselves, they're all sort of getting into character, so you're sort of working around that anxiety by going, leave yourself at the door, you can sort of be someone else for a couple of hours.